Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar on how to achieve success in China's e-commerce market. Today, we'll be talking you through a comprehensive front-end to back-end approach on how to integrate your front-end e-commerce platforms and back-end ERP systems into a cohesive market entry strategy. So many of us are well aware of the highly competitive nature of the e-commerce landscape here, with its enormous consumer base, advanced yet globally unique digital ecosystem, its mobile-first economy, and diverse market segments. This webinar, which is co-hosted today by Acclime and Redfern Digital, will provide a dual perspective, with Redfern introducing the background on the Chinese e-commerce environment, covering landscape, consumer behavior, competition, and entry strategies, while Acclime will discuss the ERP integration needed to support back-end operations. Together, these two perspectives will help businesses bridge the gap between consumer engagement and operational efficiency in China's e-commerce market. The first part of the webinar will include a presentation by Ryan Malloy, who is the CEO at Redfern Digital, an award-winning independent brand management agency that develops, manages, and distributes brands across Asia. He is responsible for the strategic direction, growth, and performance of some of the largest and most successful brands in Asia, across a dynamic range of categories. So as we can see here, it covers branding, strategy, social media, marketing, and e-commerce. As a seasoned marketeer, his experience ranges from brands across FMCG, alcohol, mother and baby, food and beverage, health and wellness. He has a passion for growing brands and supporting them with achieving their commercial goals. In his presentation, Ryan will be walking us through the e-commerce landscape in China, as well as market entry and front-end e-commerce solutions. So Redfern are a leading independent brand management agency that develops, manages, and distributes brands across Asia. Redfern Digital is responsible for the strategic direction, growth, and performance of some of the largest and most successful brands across a dynamic range of categories in the market, covering research, branding, strategy, social media marketing, e-commerce, and technical integration. So the second part of our webinar will include Florian Braunsteiner, who is the Greater China Commercial Director at Acclime. He leads the commercial team in mainland China and Hong Kong, with a focus on integrating the two jurisdictions to deliver seamless solutions for Acclime's international clients. Florian brings wide-ranging expertise in implementing ERP solutions to streamline back-end operations, and has extensive experience within healthcare, sourcing, and the retail sectors. Florian is passionate about empowering organizations to optimize their finances and operations to succeed in the Greater China region. So Acclime is a leading provider of professional corporate, accounting, tax, trade, ERP, HR, business advisory, and business strategy services. Acclime is now present in 15 markets with over 1,500 employees and over 16,000 clients globally. So Florian's presentation will dive into how back-end ERP systems work and how they integrate into the front-end e-commerce platforms. And after these two presentations, we will then open up the floor to a Q&A session to allow our audience members to raise any questions that they may have. So without further ado, I will pass this over to Ryan for his presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jacob. And what a great topic. I think we've just kind of come through the main retail season for e-commerce. Some pretty good results coming out of Q4 and Double 11. So I think it's quite a timely discussion. So today I'll be talking about the key insights for the Chinese market with regards to e-commerce. Next slide, please. So I think if we generally look at retail in China, sorry, the slide's not loading. There we go. So if we look at retail in China, I think this says a lot about the trends of where things are going. So there's lots of different discussions where e-commerce is as a percentage of total retail. And it's sitting at around 40%. I think that's a fair number to pull. And the range is usually around between 38 and I've seen it as high as 42%. And you can see from 2019 the changes that the market has undergone as e-commerce has started to carve out that market share 2024 data is not yet in. Unfortunately, it's due at the end, coming to next month. But we're looking at a similar pattern. I have some data later on in the presentation that looks at social media platform split, and they're quite similar to last year. So we're not seeing too much fluctuations this year, but a similar pattern in terms of what's happening. We're seeing generally that supermarkets are dropping off in terms of their share of the market. Hypermarkets, such as the mother and baby, kind of vertically integrated stores such as kids ones are seeing less share as more of these goods are moving to the large public platforms and social commerce. Next slide, please. So it's the only, with 11% growth, it's one of the highest percentages, if not the highest percent in terms of growth. And where is this happening? So I'll show some figures in a moment, but we have seen a very big shift in terms of the omni-channel opportunity in China. So if you went back 5, 6, 7 years, you could launch your brand on Tmall, potentially JD, and that would be sufficient for the market. What we're now seeing is that you have to have an omni-channel approach across a number of different social platforms, as well as the main ones. So most brands now we're seeing launch onto 3 to 4 platforms as a starting point, and then further expanding from there instead of launching onto one as a trial. So Tmall is still essentially the Amazon of the market. Taobao is the C2C part of that is shrinking year on year. It is the largest in terms of both revenue, in terms of revenue, but not necessarily in terms of monthly active users. It is the gold standard for most brands, and it is really where you should start. It's the highest repeat purchase. And when people already know a brand, that is a place they will go to buy, which does make it a little bit harder for market entrants, hence the need for other platforms in the social area, such as Douyin and Red. So Douyin, Chinese TikTok, essentially is the highest growth platform that we've seen. And same with Little Red Book. Little Red Book this year is going to have the highest growth out of all platforms, which will be very interesting to see how that happens. But the growth of these platforms is basically on live streaming, right? So if we look at live streaming in China now, around approximately 50% of all online sales go through live streaming, and around 20% of all retail sales in the entirety of China are through live streaming. So live streaming is very, very crucial for any brand. You can no longer enter without partaking in it. And so that's how Douyin and Red essentially work. But it's a little bit different. They utilize interest-based video content that leads through to live streaming, whereas the major platforms are more about search and buy, which means that for newer brands, they can have a bit of a cutting edge when it comes to Douyin and Red if you aren't already known. Some other ones, JD used to be very strong for logistics and infrastructure, but we've seen year on year decline. I believe now it's around the 15% mark in terms of share, if not lower. It used to be around 40% and shared the market with Tmall. In terms of Pinduoduo, this is it's kind of like a group buy platform where you get discounted goods. So I don't think for most market entrants this would be of benefit. And then there's other platforms. Kuaishou is kind of the plus one of Douyin. Very similar function, but for more rural and lower tier cities. And then we have WeChat, which works for O2O and more mini program based sales. Not really much for brands coming in unless you have a large retail presence in the market. Next slide, please. And yes, this is a further breakdown. Some of the logistics are integrated. Some of the platforms don't have, for example, cross-border e-commerce. And then we can also see, though most of them do now. So I think the only one that doesn't have cross-border e-commerce functions, or if it does, it's very limited, would be Pinduoduo. Most platforms now, if you're wanting to sell into the market, but not going through an entity, don't have a distributor, then all of these platforms are potentials. In terms of the ROI, although WeChat is actually the cheapest, you could say, to set up a mini program for cross-border, it is a private traffic platform, and therefore the ROI is very, very low. So it actually becomes quite expensive to grow this platform. Even though Tmall is probably the most expensive to set up, the ROI to date is the highest out of all of them in terms of money put into advertising spend, live streaming to return in sales. Next slide, please. And if we then look at these shares, so we do have a Q1 of 2024, where we can compare that with Q1 of 2023, as well as 2023 as a whole. Generally, what we've seen year on year is Tmall's decline. As you can see, it's gone from 47% in just 2020 down to 32%. And most of that share has been taken by Douyin. Douyin's now sitting around 18% market share, with predictions that it will reach about 20%. Well, actually ending 2024. And then JD, as you can see, has had more or less year-on-year decline from, I think even before 2020, it was already in decline, but it used to be much higher going into that year. Pinduoduo has also seen some growth, and Kuaishou has been relatively stable. So what this shows us is the opportunity in China can no longer be one platform. You have to work across a number of different ones. And if you look at live streaming, for example, it is not very strong on the likes of Tmall, where it's more repeat buy. It is stronger on the likes of, say, Douyin and Xiaohongshu. So you need to look at the strengths of each platform in order to succeed. Next slide, please. And this just runs through some of the advantages and disadvantages. So your large B2C platforms such as Tmall, high traffic volume, a lot of people will go there for search, pretty high cost in terms of operations. Websites are now, they've got to a point where they're in complete decline. Most Chinese consumers don't search through the likes of Baidu or different types of search engines. So in terms of sales, very, very low. Social commerce is where we're seeing a lot of the growth as a result of the video-based content and live streaming. Mini programs do work. We have a lot of retail clients in, say, fashion that are selling in market and have at least 5+ retail stores, but you have to have that on the ground kind of scannability into the mini program for them to function. And we're seeing that with the hypermarket models, JD has now launched really a hypermarket first kind of centric model instead of the pop stores where you can operate your own. This is the lowest risk, but you have kind of less margin and you have absolutely no brand control and quite a lot of issues on pricing if you're not careful and don't regulate it. Next slide, please. And then in terms of social commerce, I think this is the buzz that continues going into 2025. Douyin was really the first platform to see this growth. Some of the issues that have come out of Douyin is they very quickly moved to very high commissions with live streamers, sitting at around 35%. So it became very difficult to build in profitability for brands. So it was more of a volume game. A lot of our clients in nutritional health had returns, profitability, and fantastic growth through this platform. But in terms of other brands such as in food and beverage that don't have as much profitability per unit sold, it has been a bit of a struggle really building Douyin. So what have we seen this year? Little Red Book is set to become one of the highest growth platforms from a smaller base. They have lower percentage commissions. A lot of them don't have fixed fees with live streamers. So we see this being a big opportunity for brands. That being said, you need to be having at least 1 to 2 every other day because the returns per live streaming are far less than on Douyin. Some interesting elements around Xiaohongshu would be the red note surge that we've seen coming from a lot of US users moving over from TikTok in the last couple of weeks. Very exciting, over 700,000 new users to this platform. But again, it's very short term. We're yet to see the impact this will have for brands in China. Next slide, please. And again, this shows kind of the growth of live streaming. So it has slowed. However, it has stabilized. However, it's almost 20% of all retail GMV in the market. So this is something I think in terms of how do you prepare your brand for a live stream brief? How do you kind of position your hero SKUs? Live streaming really centers around 1 to 2 core products. And how do you bring out them point of differences and kind of run that elevator pitch? I would say that is just as important as shop design on Tmall now, right? So we have brands that have really built all of their success purely through live streaming. But it is a bit of a grind. You can't just work with 1 or 2 and have that success. All of the live streaming revenue, or a lot of it, has moved away from the likes of Tmall to Douyin and Red, and the frequency of live streaming is becoming high. So there's a lot of work involved in terms of being able to build the revenue from this area. But again, we're still seeing year-on-year growth, and I think going into the next 3 to 4 years, this will continue. Next slide, please. And again, this just shows kind of different things in terms of this shows how, sorry, content has differed around live streaming. And this was really the big change into Red. So traditional live streaming was kind of like late night TV shopping, right? So you kind of jump onto a stream and there'd be a bit of a discount bargaining rate and everyone would buy as quickly as they could. And you bought more for the discount than you did the product, right? The platforms have realized has brought prices down significantly for brands. And has caused issues in recent years. So going into the last Double 11, for example, Alibaba and a number of the platforms really focused on lifestyle, more traffic, content seeding instead of this kind of pitch style live streaming to try and get consumers to be involved in brands, not purely based on price, to help brands have better margin. And this seems to have worked very well, especially on the likes of, say, Little Red Book, where you have a kind of higher tier based consumer, 70% female, and a lot of them are looking for recommendations rather than a bargain, right? So this has been a big shift, I think, especially as we go into Xiaohongshu and the growth of sales on this platform in terms of how you present yourself as a lifestyle brand. Next slide, please. And this is for brand live streaming. So there's two types of live streaming. You have essentially KOL live streaming, where you work with a KOL, celebrity, etc., to host usually a 4 to 5 hour window of streaming, and you would become one brand. You can also then book out the 4 hours, but it depends on the brand story, how many SKUs you have, whether that would be financially feasible or makes sense. The other form is what's owned live streaming. So a lot of brands and agencies have set up huge live streaming centers where essentially you run your own live streaming. You have a 24-hour sales team. Benefits, advantages with owned live streaming. You own that portal, and essentially you don't have to pay large commissions. You come from a very small base, right? So it is a long-term investment for brands to look at this. Whereas with KOL live streaming, you piggyback on their current traffic, but you pay a higher commission, up to 35, even 40%, depending on how good the live streamer is. The whole point of live streaming oftentimes is really how can I get the first sale out so then I can build kind of repeat purchase moving forward. So it's more of a sampling program where you don't lose money. That's kind of the idea around the concept, so that people then when they come back to Tmall, they know to search your brand, and that's really where we're finding that true profit can be made. But as you can see here, it's 40. What are we now? We're about 48 to 51. So around a 50-50 split between the two. And brands can definitely utilize both in terms of trying to grow the brand in market. But most brands would start with KOL live streaming. Next slide, please. And now we'll talk about kind of paid traffic off origin. So then when we come over to Tmall and some of the larger platforms, you have like Pinxiaobao, which is all around like keyword packages. You have SEO. The brand zone is Pinxiaobao. Then you have SEO, which is kind of like different keyword bidding. Then you have Diamond Booth, which would be like the larger display, super recommendations. There are a number of different tools. Tmall now have an AI, which can help in the first couple of months. We usually use it. It's not great, but it does help in terms of trying to look at the current base of potential customers and building that out in the first month or two. And then we usually go to a manual setting of paid traffic. But it is quite a complex ecosystem. And this is something, whether you're working with a partner or you're doing it yourself, you have to ensure that you're optimizing all the time. Next slide, please. Yeah, and test and learn. I think the other thing as well, in the first 3 to 4 months, you're hitting an ROI of even 1-to-1 is a pretty decent ROI, right? So you're trying to bring up the return on investment within the first year so that you're putting in the right amount of spend on in-app versus out-of-app. And I'll talk about these splits later. There's been some research done that basically will help advise brands on where should I be putting my money. But you need to be looking at also off-platform media. So off-platform media, the difficulty that comes with this in China is, although a lot of the platforms are starting to link, there are still issues in measuring, if I work with a KOL on Red, how does it support the sales that I have on Tmall? There are links now where you can start to see, for example, how KOLs on Little Red Book are helping my Little Red Book store. But to Tmall traffic, it is all under off-platform support, right? So being able to look at store visitation around certain campaigns will help you better optimize how you're working with off-platform media, which is crucial. And the partner that you work with in e-commerce must be very strong at media marketing. At least 40 to 50% of the budget will go into socials in the first year because the brand is not yet known. Next slide, please. And again, this just kind of brings all of it together. So on top of the paid traffic within Tmall, the off-platform traffic, you then have other types of content traffic. And this is a key area. This traffic is free, right? So Tmall gives you the opportunity to create videos that you can input into the ecosystem to get traffic, just like Douyin are doing with theirs, that can help in terms of driving sales, right? And they're putting a lot more effort into it this year so that they can then compete with the likes of, say, Douyin and Little Red Book. This, I think, is one area that is often overlooked by both agencies and brand, and we're seeing a lot of kind of ROI metrics and opportunities about growing the brand in terms of awareness, a top funnel, not just necessarily selling in the first 3 to 4 months of launch. Next slide, please. And then here it kind of breaks it down again in terms of what can you test and learn, right? The different types of creative, product segmentation. On Tmall, you will usually run with 3 SKUs as your heroes. You have your entry level, you have kind of the hero of all heroes, and then an entry level will be more on the price point, and then you'd have a third one, which might be your unique point of difference SKU, right? On Douyin, you have 1. So what we usually look at is what's working on Tmall, and then how do we take these learnings over onto Douyin to then support on our live streaming strategy, where we would focus on 1 SKU. So being able to test and learn very quickly in the beginning of what's selling well, what do live streamers want, will be key to success. And also looking at pricing and promotion of how that will change. Better go high in the beginning. You will find that you might have to adjust in terms of that pricing, but going up when you started low is always very difficult. Finding the right target audience that is the best buyer as well. These are all different things that in the first 6 months you should work to really understand to get the best ROI. Next slide, please. And pricing, right? So if we look at pricing, there's essentially A, B, S, and S plus pricing in China. S plus would be your deepest level. So you really need to work with your partners to understand how far we're willing to go. That would then be, working with Li Jiaqi, so like the top live streamers or Double 11, you would always have that as kind of your base price. Then with other pricing elements, you have kind of daily selling price, which is the original price with a line through it. And then you might have some smaller discounts. So trying to understand that pricing is really important. We've seen so many brands in China that have kind of raced to the bottom. In some categories, they're kind of been pushed to do it, but definitely raced to the bottom. And it's very hard to build that back later. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the content strategy, right? So being able to work with kind of in-app content that's public and then private content as well. Seeding, we know the word of mouth culture is so important in China in terms of driving sales. We have seen the power of KOLs waning. So KOLs used to do 3 to 4 ROI. We're now seeing they're doing under 1. So how do you counter that? It is really volume. It is working with 5,000 everyday people, small micro KOCs, rather than working with 5 to 10 big KOLs. And having this volume, being able to reuse their content and post it within all of the platforms. So when people are browsing, they come across the brand. Next slide, please. And this is just some examples of different types that I mentioned before. So we have like SEO in terms of the search, Diamond Booth in terms of the display, and then different types of content and placement as well that you can see here in terms of the different, the Guangguang, Weitao, and different kind of social content areas of e-commerce. So the distinction between social content or social media and e-commerce is no longer very clear in China, right? From all points of social through to e-commerce, there are sales and then vice versa. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then again, live streaming, different forms of recommendation, product packaging, and then you can also use different types of content in the video structure to then support live streaming. If we look at Douyin, for example, if you were to just go into Douyin and start a live stream, you won't sell very much. It's a funnel. You have to essentially use micro KOCs, your own content, create lots of data, pull this through into into the data bank, and then you utilize this data and drop that into live streams, right? So that people will come across your live stream. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to get the sales and ROI. So the way that Douyin works is a quick pace platform on the last 30 days of noise, recommendations, data bank capability, and then also live streaming. And once you have one, you can't stop. You need to make sure that every 3 to 4 days you have another one to ensure that your sales remain high. Next slide, please. And so things around live streaming strategy, live streaming ROI hasn't gone, right? The good old days of on Tmall where you could get 50x return just doing a Tmall live stream is no longer there. It is harder. You need to do it more frequently. You should be doing on Tmall. You need to move it over to the likes of Red and Douyin, but it's still there. It's still 50% of all sales online. It's just changed how it works. Two, brands are now seeing personal care plus nutritional health at 40% of annual GMV. So in certain categories, live streaming is it's a must. Three, pay-per-click platforms such as Tmall are important, but on decline, but they are high in repeat purchase. The issue is with just having a Douyin and Little Red Book, you won't get the repeat purchase you can get from the likes of Tmall. So things to take into account with live streaming would be margin and feasibility. You've got 35% with the live streamer, 10% going on logistics and fulfillment, potentially. You've got and platform fee. You've got tax. You're at least probably 50 to 60% in costs, 10% on discount. So you need to understand how does that fit for the brand and whether it's feasible on that platform. Understanding your target. Douyin, Little Red Book, these are interest-based platforms. So you need to understand first the interest of your target to then be able to link through to the sales element as well. Next slide, please. And the final part around that was just annual live streamers. Once you get one that is good, lock in annual contracts, rinse and repeat. And so if we look at spend on Tmall versus social media, this I think is a really important slide. It was done by Walk the Chat. Some of their analysis is Nazy in China. That some of their analysis I find to be very good. This one was a poll that was basically run with different agencies around the market, and I completely agree with it. Depending on certain categories, some are more prone to kind of immediate purchase. So you would find that generally they would have a smaller share of spend on social media than ones that are less prone to immediate purchase. You would see that they put more of their money into social media to build brand. But what you can see is, if you're under the kind of the 5 million area, you would put only 20 to 30% of your sales in Tmall, 70 to 80% outside of Tmall. As you grow the brand, you can start to move that over onto Tmall. Another reason is your universe is so small. You don't have enough data to target effectively on the likes of Tmall until you've brought in the traffic and the machine has learned. So usually in the beginning, you might see that even more than 50% of your spend would be on social media. And that is how crucial it is to success in terms of sales as well. Next slide, please. An opening EC store is not enough. So yeah, I think, in terms of advertising, working with KOLs, working with shopping festivals, offline promotions, sampling, ensuring that you have social media accounts on other platforms. These are all just so important, right? Like we find a lot of our customer service is now coming through our socials. We find that, KOLs maybe aren't as powerful as they used to be, but they're a base of recommendation. Red is a search-based platform, first and foremost, for information. So if someone comes across your brand on Tmall and they search on Red and there's no notes around this is a great brand, very unlikely they will buy the product. They will go to one of your competitors. So it is a long tail approach. You need to have the foundational marketing there. And then you need to invest in ads. We are seeing a movement away from KOLs back to traditional advertising as consumers are having less and less influence from KOLs. I think they've figured out a lot of them get paid. And that's moving back to brand videos and advertising functions that can have a more mass reach. But you need a combination of all of these for success. Next slide, please. And how to win. A lot of brands as well. I'll take one of our brands, for example. They're doing over, I think, about 100 million pounds now. And the flagship is only around 10 to 15% of the sales, right? So a lot of the other sales come through C2C networks. They come from sub-distributors within the Taobao ecosystem. They come from sub-distributors within the live streaming ecosystem. So you need to understand the online distribution that grows out from the flagship. Flagship's where you start, but it will not be where you end. And with that comes margins and network. Live streaming, again, is margins and inventory. The one thing that upsets me the most about live streaming is when you really hit it well and something happens great, you then have to go back and say, oh, are we out of stock, or what's going to happen there? So live streaming is all about inventory management. And you can't stop e-commerce. Once you're 6 months in, if you suddenly stop, the platforms work on 30, 60, or 90-day last amount of sales, right? If you start to drop your weighting, you're starting all over again. Once you're invested in e-commerce, you need to keep pushing month on month that growth. It is true at some point you will have a repeat purchase that will give you a baseline, but if you're growing a brand, you have to be ready for that, have the inventory ready, investment and growth. And I think having the right partner is very, very key. They become your distributor and market. They'll help you break success or meet failure, right? I think NPD optimization, launching new SKUs, understanding the hero SKUs, and getting that right balance is just, in terms of test and learn, is very pivotal. And then really the first year is where you get a lot of that information. Next slide, please. This is a case study example. I didn't put the brand name in there, but basically it's a food and beverage brand, and it shows how we ran a test and learn. We were handed this from their previous agency. We ran a test and learn within 2 weeks to try and understand what was happening, why the sales weren't increasing, why they were very stable. We used different types of creative assets. We started to basically change the SKU focus. As you can see, there was a 300% increase in ROAS on paid traffic, with only a 35% increase in investment. So this is it's a make or break it for brands when they're online. And as you can see then, when we ran into the Double Nine festival, we were so confident in terms of, okay, now we can really start to scale the brand. If you don't have the foundational areas ready, you can't scale. It will cost too much. You will lose money. Next slide, please. And again, this is an example on Douyin, right? So if you look at Douyin, this was running into Double 11. So basically it looks at how owned live streaming, the amount of owned live streaming was done increased over each period. You need to understand what's working, test and learn, but a lot of live streaming, right? So we're looking at kind of 15 hours per day going into Double 11, over 300 plus RMB in terms of transaction value. So you're bringing up the transaction value, you're bringing up the amount of live streaming you're doing. The investment ratio increases. The number of creative pieces you produce increase. But interesting, the cost per creative increases too, because then you start to realize what is working, and you're going to actually put time, resources, investment, models behind that creative to really get the best ROI that you can. But the most important number is really, how do you watch that bottom line in terms of ROI? Next slide, please. And this is an example very quickly of a case study. So Zaki Glico, this wasn't our client, but we thought it was one that has done very well. So they basically, when they first came into the market, they did a deep dive into Chinese consumers to understand how snacking works, different occasions, lifestyles, and habits. They automatically jumped into an omni-channel strategy across, I believe now they're across 15 different platforms, to allow for, when they run large media campaigns, for brands to always have a touch point of where they can buy. Next slide, please. They have a clear and diversified product strategy. So the brand has a wide number of SKUs. It's created 14 user-friendly product categories. So you can see here as an example of how they kind of break that down. And then they have best-selling products that they push for all of their IP collaborations and all of their live streaming. So they're very clear on the ones they want to put forward. They do local celebrity live streams on Tmall, working with different kind of actresses. So this is something I wouldn't say you would do in the first or second year, but you really need to build IP within the third year. We're now working with a brand at the moment where we've been able to secure a celebrity deal that works for both parties, but is over a number of years, and essentially brings them in more as a partner, you could say, than anything else. So there's lots of different kind of options of how you work with celebrities, but the IP capability is the most important. They've also developed a membership system for repeat buy, which I think is so important. building a very strong membership system within Tmall and Douyin will really help in terms of repeat purchase, reminders, sending out SMS in terms of like certain festivals that are coming up and trying to build in that loyalty. Next slide, please. It's not coming up. Oh, and there we go. And then in terms of Douyin, right? So leveraging Douyin e-commerce Super Brand Day to introduce new products, themed marketing campaigns with celebrity participation, and also they've done different types of pop-up stores. So being able to link then Douyin with that offline play as well. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there we go. So I think I ran over a little bit there, but thank you very much. And yeah, back to you, Jacob.
Absolutely great and fascinating as well. It's such a unique and deep ecosystem, but yeah, really appreciate your insights there. Okay, great. So next up, we'll be having Florian Braunsteiner from Acclime. He's our Greater China Commercial Director. Florian, you can take it over.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Ryan. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So
Yes.
yeah, so thanks, Ryan, for giving us the tour of the front end of e-commerce in China, and I would call it the more exciting part of the presentation, because we're now gonna dive a bit deeper into what actually happens in the back end. So after you work with Ryan and all your operations lift off and you have massive success on all the channels we discussed today, how do you actually handle this in the back end? Okay, and that's our support who also at Acclime. And Jacob, if you please flip the next slide. So what we're trying to do for our clients is we want to handle our clients' operations. And we have various ways of doing that. So as Jacob introduced in the beginning, we are a corporate service provider. That means we often take over accounting work for our clients, but also trade and order management. And in order to handle this professionally, we and our clients need an ERP system. So an enterprise resource planning system. I'm sure you know what that is. There's a couple of big ones out there. So you might be familiar with SAP, for instance, or with Oracle, or with Microsoft. And that's what we work with. The system that we prefer, we don't work on it exclusively, but the system that we prefer is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. And we have selected this system because it's a very good all-round system for our clients. And when I say our clients, those are somewhat similar to Ryan's clients. So we work predominantly for mid-sized firms that have subsidiaries in China, many of which are from the retail world, cosmetics, fashion, and so on. And once those companies sell on e-commerce, we need to support on the back end to connect the e-commerce with the warehousing, with the trading, with the accounting, with the reporting. And obviously, this is not possible on Excel sheets or something like that, right? And this is where we come into play. And this is also where Microsoft and its ERP system Dynamics comes into play for our clients. And just to recap some advantages. So why do clients select Microsoft ERP or other ERPs here? Well, pretty simple, what I said before. So apart from the operational benefits, there is a couple of more advantages. So number one, these days, all these systems are typically cloud-based, okay? So that makes it much easier for you in terms of maintaining the system, connecting them to other systems. So for instance, e-commerce, for instance, warehousing, or other ERP system back in headquarters. They come at quite low variable cost. So you have to pay some user accounts, but other than that, following an implementation, there's not too much cost on top. And of course, you can keep this lean. So what we often do here is we would work as your outsourced ERP manager following implementation, so you don't have to build up any headcount. Last but not least, but also a big advantage with a cloud-based system is cybersecurity, which is basically outsourced to your provider, and Microsoft, of course, is leading here among some other firms. So here is a brief overview of the various modules that often come with an ERP system. Okay, so of course, financial management and supply chain and order management, those are the most prominent ones, especially if you're active in the retail space, in e-commerce and so forth. These two you will definitely need. Often also the system is either connected to an external CRM system like maybe Salesforce or HubSpot, or also with Microsoft's own CRM system, which is also a good choice, called D365 Sales. For some of our clients, we also handle production. I think that's less important for today, but also, of course, very important when you have manufacturing in China, that you handle the system base. And Microsoft comes with another advantage. You might be using this already. Microsoft has great reporting tools like, for instance, Power BI, and those can be very easily linked with the ERP. So that makes your reporting, your data analysis very sleek on the system. Okay, so now a bit closer to today's topic. I wanted to start off, I want to explain this in 3 steps, okay, how this works, because it's a little bit technical, but I hope towards the end of this presentation it's clear. So here on the first slide, I wanted to give a general overview how all these systems communicate with each other, and just to show this on one page here. So you can see on the bottom left, you have the e-commerce platforms listed. All of those just mentioned also by Ryan. And these platforms actually, they don't directly communicate with your ERP system or with your controlling. They are normally connected through something called an order management system. So what we would do then is we connect the order management system with the ERP system. We have to build an interface. I will explain on the next slide a bit more in detail how this works. And then, of course, whenever you sell your product on Red or on Tmall or wherever it is, you need to invoice this in your system, but you also need to let your warehouse, let your inventory management know that some more stock has been sold, right? Makes sense. So that means you need to connect the ERP system also with, you see this here on the bottom right, a warehouse management system. So there's many options out there, but basically this is now the centerpiece, the ERP. So it stands between the e-commerce management and the warehouse. It captures all the data and it helps you manage the back end, whereas the front end is directly on the platform. Of course, you can also connect the ERP then, and these are 2 more items to see, 2 more icons to see here. You can also connect it to a point of sale, so to offline distribution. So many of you might have also not just online sales, but also offline sales, and this you need to capture well. Again, you can build an interface. And also with your own CRM system, there needs to be a connection, obviously. Okay, so that's just the big picture. Okay, so now here on the next slide, we're diving a bit more into the nitty-gritty details, and I hope I'm not putting anyone to sleep now going through this, but I'll try to be brief here. So I just explained a bit how this works between the ERP system being the centerpiece and then the order management system and the warehouse management. And here you just see an automated workflow to give you a better example of this. So we start here just on the top, where Business Central, so this is the Microsoft ERP system, communicates with a warehouse management system. So the 2 of them communicate data. Okay, so we just did a purchase, we just did a sale, and now we need to communicate with the warehouse management system. Then the warehouse management system communicates, of course, with the order management system. So the sale that has been done on the e-commerce platform now needs to be fulfilled, and so the data needs to be linked between the 2. Okay, so the next step then is we need to bring all this data back into Business Central, so to complete the circle here. So that means the data gets converted on a daily basis. There's various ways how to convert it, but we often use XML files to keep it simple. On a daily basis, the data gets converted and brought via an XML file into Business Central. Okay, this can be automated, this can be semi-automated. It depends how you want to do it. Even if it's just semi-automated, it's just one click. So you get all the data of the system, the total amount that you sold there, and then within this amount, you can look into the various item numbers. All of this gets just uploaded in one click and matched within your Business Central or within your ERP system. So of course, in the middle, from the conversion of the XML file to bring it to the ERP system, you need to find some safe way how to transfer the data. Okay, so this you do either via a SFTP or something like SharePoint, right? So this is how you bring the data then into Business Central, where then the invoices of the day get auto-generated. There's a sales invoice that gets posted, and that gets again communicated to the warehouse, and there we go. We start again the next day. Okay, so this is the whole cycle, how it goes day in and day out, and you can fully automate that and just basically at the end of the day or end of the month look at your report, and you will be clear on how much inventory is left and what's the status for your payment and so forth. Okay. So I hope I have not put anyone to sleep here yet. So what we're gonna do now in the next slide here, I pre-recorded exactly what I just described in a simplified version, and I wanted to show this in the system because otherwise it's too abstract. So yeah, I'll be on mute now while I see the recording here playing. Okay, so after now having explained how the system works in the workflow, I also would like to give you a short demo of the system. So I just logged into Business Central, and here on the landing page, you can see the most important facts that you need to know. So you will see your sales, your purchases, and of course, your payments and the status of the payments. And a little bit further up, you also see a convenient summary of, for instance, your sales of this month. So from your landing page now, I'd like to give you a short tour that's relevant for e-commerce, for B2C invoices, but also for your inventory management. So we start off with a customer overview, which you see here. We created a couple of e-commerce platforms here for the demonstration on the system. So you could imagine that e-com platform one, this could be Tmall. And on the right-hand side, you also see the balance that's outstanding. You see the number of orders that we're currently processing. And we can also explore what has been going on these platforms in more details here on the next page. So what you will see here are a number of invoices since the beginning of the year. Okay, so since the 2nd of January. And you will see that we have two orders coming in from e-commerce platform number 10, and then one from number 1. So again, this could be Tmall, and one from number 2, maybe JD.com. You will see also the amounts that have been invoiced on this platform so far. So that's quite a convenient overview, giving you the full picture of your sales activities online. So lastly, coming to the warehouse management and order management. So you will see here, I pulled up here a product. In this case, it is a chair. It's a leather chair, product name A. And we have a couple of facts here about the chair. So you can see the item number that's up here in the system. So every product has an item number, of course, every item. And you will see the weight, you will see the price, and of course, you will see the inventory. So we see here, we have 110 chairs on stock. And we can see in detail what has been happening to these chairs, when they have been sold, who they have been sold to. And that's, of course, crucial when it comes to restocking and the communication between the warehouse management system. Okay, so I hope I've been able to give you a brief demo here of the system. And of course, on request, we can show you many, many more functions. Thank you. All right. Yeah. So summing up and coming to a close here. If you're interested, or if you ever have implemented an ERP system, I very briefly wanted to go through various stages that you have here in the project. So obviously in the beginning, we need to understand what are the current system, what is your system environment that you're using. We need to explore your various customizations that you will need in the system. We want to stress that every implementation is different, right? So everybody has different trade flow, everybody has a different layout of documents that they need, different supply base. So there is no one-fits-all solution. But with the Microsoft system, Business Central, you are quite flexible. It's quite adaptable. That's why we like it. So once we've done this together, we come to the next step, which is the development part. And for that, depending on the complexity, we need anywhere between 3, maybe 4 or 5 months to roll out your system. 4 or 5 months rather, only if it's a manufacturing setup. And then we hand the system back to you for testing. So that's about a couple of weeks where you have time to do a so-called user acceptance test. If everything is in order, we go live together, give it another few weeks to check if the functions are as you want and be. And following the implementation, we can keep supporting you. And as I said earlier, we can support you on an outsourced basis. You don't need to hire your own staff on the ERP side, no ERP manager needed, which is normally quite a costly position. And what the support often means in our case when it comes to e-commerce is that we will probably build further interfaces for you. So like Ryan described, you often start off with 1 or 2 platforms, but you have to go for a multi-platform strategy. And for each of those platforms, you normally need some sort of interface between the platform and your own operations, the ERP system, the warehouse management system, and so forth. And yeah, we're happy to support you with that. So on my last slide here, I wanted to give a case study that wraps up somehow what we're trying to do for our clients and what challenges we face. So this particular example is one of our long-standing clients. It's a well-known European fashion company, and we help them since over 10 years now to run operations in Hong Kong, in mainland China, and also in the Asia-Pacific region. And they started out with mostly actually offline stores and some online retail back in the day. The balance has significantly shifted now. They have much higher online sales than offline sales. They had good days, bad days, but at the moment they're doing actually quite fine. They had to restructure 1 or 2 times or revise, let's say, the strategy in the region. And then starting from China, they further expanded into other markets in Asia. And so what we help them with is exactly what I described earlier. We help them with setting up companies in the region. We help them with running the back end of the companies, including handling all the e-commerce business from an operational perspective, from a fulfillment perspective. And we, of course, support them with the warehouse management too, and have done so for the entire region. And yeah, so I can also put one more comment here forward, which is, China is one e-commerce market. It's maybe the most complex one in Asia, but I'm not sure if Ryan also does other markets, but the complexity is still quite high. Also, if you go to Indonesia or if you might go to Vietnam, there is always some particularities about those markets that need special development, special adaptation of your strategy. And that's why it's important to have the right partners that can help, because setting up, your own team in all those markets, that's probably going to kill your budget unless you're really a very big brand. Okay, so with this, I'd like to close and then also say thanks again, Jacob, for your moderation, and also Ryan for giving us some very good insights here, some very good updates. And what I'm really impressed with here is, once again, how fast and dynamic the Chinese e-commerce market is and how fast it's changing.
Thanks so much, Florian. Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us today at this webinar on succeeding in China's e-commerce market. We've discussed some interesting insights, I think, to help businesses thrive in this competitive and, as you said, Flo, this unique environment. I think that that's the word. It's kind of unlike any other country in that sense. Thanks to Ryan for providing an in-depth overview of China's e-commerce market, including consumer behavior, market dynamics, and some strategies for front-end e-commerce success. And thanks to you, Florian, for highlighting the role of the back-end ERP systems, which I'm sure, even though you said that they could be a little bit dry at first, when it's your business and when you want it to thrive, then I think it would be a lot more interesting. So thank you for that. And I just want to thank everybody and express our appreciation for everybody in the audience for your attention and your participation. If you have any further questions or would like to explore how Acclime or Redfern can support your businesses, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We look forward to seeing you again at future events. So thank you, everybody, again, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye.